Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar to learn about Vessel. I am joined by Devin and Taylor that will be addressing today's presentation on Vessel. So Devin, if you wanted to go ahead and do your quick intro, and then we'll move along with Taylor.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. And we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Like Angela said, my name is Devin Davies. I am the Executive Vice President for Vessel and co-founder. And I'm going to just do a quick introduction to Vessel and just give you just a high-level overview of what the company is and what we do, if you're not familiar yet with us. And then I will turn it over to Taylor, who is our product manager, to run through more of the technical training for you. So again, the company is Vessel, and Vessel was founded in 2015, and we've been to market for about 3 to 4 years selling our products. And what we do is we manufacture high-end audio streaming amplifiers. We have an A6, A3, and an A1, so a 6-zone, 3-zone, and a single-zone solution for that. We are really pleased with our so far with the response that we get from dealers and distributors out there and homeowners as well. We were very pleased with that positive feedback that we are receiving, and we continue to innovate and continue to just make new products and new solutions for the market. So Taylor, if you want to go to the next slide there. So in this training, we hope to keep this very focused and as short as we can, but there's a lot to cover. So we're going to talk about the Vessel basics, what makes Vessel and some best practices with our products. We're going to talk about network preparation, which is absolutely crucial to the success of Vessel and the user experience. And then we'll go through some setup instructions, and then toward the end we will touch on some extra features that will be useful for you to know about Vessel. So the first thing that we just want to talk about is we in the very beginning we coined a term called native streaming. So Taylor, if you can go to the next slide there. So native streaming capability is, in our terms, is the ability to stream music from any music app on the market, from any device to any zone or multiple zones within an audio system. So again, native streaming is kind of what we feel sets us apart from any of our competition. It's the ability to simply stream any content from your device from any music app. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, and again we'll answer questions about what that means exactly, but we just want you to know that's kind of what makes up Vessel and what makes us different from the competition. And then as I mentioned, the next slide there, we have some of the just basics about Vessel. Again, I've already mentioned, but our system will work with any mobile device out there. It can be an Android, it can be iOS device, it can be any other device for that matter, and you can stream any of that content to a Vessel system. So very nice, very user friendly. And then if you look at the next slide here, this slide kind of shows you that the different platforms that you can stream Vessel on. The first one here is Spotify. It shows you that you can stream any music from your Spotify account, and again select any zone or multiple zones, party zones within the Spotify app to play to the Vessel system. Same thing with Apple Music. You can see here kind of what that looks like. The interface and the user experience with that. Very simple to select your song. You can see your zones there right within the Apple Music app, and you can select a single or multiple zones to create a party zone and have full control right there within the Apple Music app. And it's the same thing with other platforms as well. We've got YouTube Music, Amazon Music, Pandora are some common ones. But again, we can't stress enough that the vessel system works with any platform, any music app out there. So very, very nice, and again, gives you just a lot of flexibility. So and then the last thing I'll mention before I turn it over to Taylor here is we have some features built into the Vessel app. The Vessel app is an app that we created mostly for the integrator, and mostly for the integrator, I should say. And this gives you some basic controls and features. When setting up a vessel system, you can see here you can manage your different zones. We have EQ settings. We have mono output settings. We've got default on volume and some different things there. So again, this is set up for used for setup. We have some paging features as well that can be used, but again, the day-to-day experience is the experience that the homeowner already is used to, and that is the music app that they already use. And so this is just kind of nice. The Vessel app is kind of nice to again go in and adjust any settings that may need to be adjusted. So anyway, so that's just a high level overview of Vessel. There's much more that we could dive into when it comes to some of the the features and different ways that you can use Vessel. Again, it's a very flexible, very easy to use system, and but one of the things that I kind of mentioned already that makes Vessel that's absolutely crucial to the Vessel experience is networking. So Taylor's gonna talk about best use cases with best practices with setting up a vessel with different networks that may be out there, and but we want you to know that this is this training is very important for you as the integrator to have a very good experience installing the vessel system, and again for the the homeowner to have a good experience as well. So from there, Taylor's going to take it over and teach you more about that.
Awesome, thanks, Devin. Usually when we do some of these presentations, we're able to communicate and see each other's faces and try to understand some of our humor. So I apologize if maybe some of these jokes fall flat. We, in this day and age, here we are, and so we'll do the best that we can to kind of communicate what it is that we're trying to communicate to your team. And I would have hoped it was a little bit more interactive, but again, hopefully we can use the Q&A at the end of the session to go over any questions you might have and to even dive back into some of these slides. So feel free to take some notes on your end, and we can go back to parts of the presentation and go through some of these. So really, what's important for an installer when first taking a vessel and attempting to put it into a customer's existing ecosystem is really to stop and to wait a moment and to recognize that there are some other changes that probably need to be made to the current customer's network. And so thanks to Vanilla Ice, hopefully that's a great reminder to you that when you get anxious to put the vessel in. First, what you need to do is obviously plan and analyze your network topology, understand whether or not internet service provider has come in and done the proper setup, and know what best practices are for the vessel to fit within that system. Then obviously we're going to go over what you'll need to do is log into that networking equipment, make some adjustments to that network that will open up basically free-flowing data back and forth between the streaming device, between the vessel, and the customer's existing router and switch and all networking equipment. And it's important to remember to reboot that network once you make those changes. I know some networks don't necessarily they say that they've saved, but it's important that you do a full reboot on all of those networking products in order to really get those settings changed. And then finally, you can install the vessel at that point. And we're quickly going to go through go through how to do that once we're done taking a look at networking. So these are just a few examples of the topology that you're going to see and that you have seen. You guys, I suspect that you're already professionals in this, and so just really quickly, maybe for those who are learning networking, we're going to go through some of these options that you'll see. You know, obviously, we're in this day and age with the modem router combo unit. It's great. This is what most users typically have in their homes. Also, there's the situation where a company might provide their internet service provider modem with either with a router that's specifically just for routing. That can be their own specific router brand, or it can be another popular third-party router that they provide. I've seen multiple different scenarios. Also, this is very typical for maybe those larger homes where you've got a modem router combo unit and a switch and access points. That can be an unmanaged or managed switch depending on what the user prefers. Also, either a modem or a modem router combo unit plus a third-party networking solution. This can be problematic for us, and we're going to go over why that can be problematic. Specifically, with this one, it's very common to get a double NAT. And for those, I'm sure many of you understand what the double NAT is, but it's when you have two DHCP listings on your network, and both, or if there's multiple different sources of IP addresses, it can cause some issues in communicating back and forth between all Wi-Fi enabled devices. So it's important that we get rid of a double NAT with our product. And then finally, there's a modem with a third-party system, which is a bit easier. You don't have to put that modem router combo unit into bridge mode, but it still presents some problems of its own when trying to listen to audio. Specifically, all of us like to think that these solutions like the Eros or the Google Wi-Fi's, that our internet's working fine, we're getting signals to our phones, but in the audio and the gaming space specifically, as there have been advances within those frames, within that technology, it's important that we adjust our network in order to prepare for those. And so, I think that it's important to go through each of these. And so, some specifics. Bear with me here. We're doing a little bit of I guess diving into each of these different networking aspects really quick. With access points, it's important that you have an access point controller, and then with access points that you consolidate to one switch. It also is important that the vessel gets attached, or if you're utilizing an A3 or A6 or an A1 when it's wired in, that not only are all of your access points attached to that same switch, but also your vessels are also attached to that same switch, even if it's an unmanaged, even if there are multiple unmanaged switches that you have on your network. Obviously, and this is very common, but I think all of us are very aware that switches need to be placed below the router or downstream from the router. But very frequently when we get customers or dealers calling in, the first thing that we find, it's very common for us to find that a switch is in between the modem and the router or ahead of the router. And so that can cause problems when it comes to trying to send packets back and forth on your network. Obviously, if there are two routers, you'll need to put the one, typically the internet service provider's router, into bridge mode. I do know that some internet service provider routers do not supply bridge mode, but somehow, I guess manually, if you're able to turn off the DHCP and the IP reservations, then that can work. But it's simply important that you only have one router on your network that's handing out IP addresses. And then finally placing the vessel as far downstream as possible. And that's, I guess, closest to, really it's the access points. We'll talk a little bit more on specifics there in some of these scenarios. So in a bit more, I guess, in a smaller environment where we'd have everybody kind of talking, collaborating back and forth, I've got a little test here called, pin the vessel on the network. Right here, we have a modem router combo unit with a couple of switches, unmanaged switches, and access points. And the question is, where would you put in a vessel at this point? And what would you do for this network? And I know it's common for your team to use, I believe Streakwave is very familiar with Ubiquiti, and so a lot of this presentation is specific to Ubiquiti. If we don't have a Ubiquiti security gateway and we're just using the internet service provider's router, where would we put in the vessel here? So I'll go ahead and answer my own question. I would put the vessel on that same switch that all of those access points are connected to as well. This way, like we said, that there's free-flowing information between those access points and the vessel, that those are easily discoverable, and there aren't multiple paths that data packets have to take in order to get that instantaneous feedback. Another scenario that we have, internet service provider router, modem router combo unit, and then a third-party routing system. Question is, where would you wire your vessel if you were going to wire your vessel? So to answer my own question, I would have called upon somebody to to let us know what they would have done. Basically connect a switch to that main ERO node or to that third-party router, and then I would have placed the modem router combo unit up there at the very top into a bridge mode, so that we're only having a single deliverer of DHCP protocol. There might be some more questions that you guys have on this further down the line. We'll be happy to go over those at the end. And then another very common scenario where you've got a modem router combo unit with a couple of beacons or some type of access points. Very common. Where would you put the vessel? And the answer is that you would install it behind the modem router combo unit. Like it says here, you can add a switch if there's not enough ports. And then it's very important that, especially when installing a vessel via Ethernet cable, that you do not install it onto a Wi-Fi extender or an access point. A lot of the translating of WAN to LAN can occur here, and especially when you are installing via a wired connection, it's important that that it has a wired signal directly to the router in this instance. So again, we'll go over some more specifics if we need to, and if there's questions out there. The next step that we had is obviously logging into your equipment. This should be a pretty basic conversation here, but I will go over it here, and we'll be providing this information for you. For routers, there's those typical IP addresses, and you can see just using an IP scanner like Angry IP or Advanced Scanner or Fing is even it's an app that you can get on your phone that will do the same thing, but it can find those IP addresses, and you'll just need to log into that equipment. For switches and unmanaged switches, you don't have an IP address. Many forget that managed switches do have its own web UI. With Ubiquiti, it's a little different since it's all through the controller. But again, important, even with access points, that you are logging into each of those access points and making sure that the settings are to our suggestions and to best practices. So I know this is quite a bit on this screen. I don't love it, but I'm going to go through specifically on the Ubiquiti system, what is a typical network update that we have to do before we install a vessel onto the system. This is just some general router settings for you. These are ones that we are typically looking out for on tech support if we're having some issues or if there's some type of connection problem happening. These are the basics that we go back to. You'll notice there's probably some of these look familiar to you, but I'll let you guys study that and take that in. Again, each router, each system is very, very different in how they display and arrange these different types of settings. Multicasting, it's almost impossible between networking companies to determine which settings do what. Again, once you get to that scenario, there's a bit of translation that needs to be done from multicasting to specific terminology that these router companies use. Same with Apple. You can see here just a couple that we have is Bonjour or Zero Conf Discovery. That's Apple's protocol to make sure that all of their devices are readily available on the network for you to connect to. So with access points, very common to see something called AP isolation or client isolation. That can kill your mojo when you're connected to that with your phone and trying to connect to the internet. It makes it very difficult to have a clean connection. And also, specifically, I know that it's Arachnus. They by default don't enable UPnP or Bonjour discovery methods on their access points. So again, little tidbits, all depending on the company. And then manage switch settings. Ubiquiti actually does a pretty good job of not having to go into those specific settings, but we find that it's very important on managed switches that IGMP snooping is enabled and that also UPnP is enabled. Sometimes we forget that those managed switches do need some adjustments there. So let's go over Ubiquiti settings really quickly within the controller. This is a big one for us. Auto-optimized network. They unify in Ubiquiti the way that they've implemented the auto-optimized network. It's not great. There's a whole bunch of packets that we've noticed that get lost. They attempt to do some sifting and some reorganizing, and it's just it's not there. It's not there yet. That auto-optimized network solution. So we suggest the first thing you do when you're going into a new system or setting up a new one is to disable that. You can kind of see, I'll go back to the other slide, you can see over on the left, these are the classic settings that I'm dealing with. The new settings within the Ubiquiti controller are, they're a bit more searchable. I don't think they're as user-friendly, but to each their own. So I'm just gonna show you the classic settings here. And auto-optimized network was under site. And then you'll notice the next screen, I go under wireless networks. I believe that by default, they just recently, in a recent update, stopped enabling block LAN to WLAN multicast and broadcasting data. So that, I think you're okay now moving forward, but that deals explicitly with our packets and with sharing of information over your network. Also, you can see down at the bottom, there's an enable multicast enhancement or IGMP v3. That's important for our vessel to work seamlessly. And then under networks, there's the IGMP snooping. That specifically is when you do have a switch in the scenario. Typically, it's switches that are doing all the snooping. So enable that. It's not enabled by default. You have to go in and update that. And then also UPnP. Both WLAN and LAN need to be updated. Sorry, WAN. You'll also find that in services, Ubiquiti is interesting this way, that they require a specific Ubiquiti gateway in order to update, in order to have some of these services. I mean, it makes sense, but it's interesting that they still put it in their controller. That's just how they implement it. I believe that these settings are still available to check on and off, but you will need, if you're using a security gateway, then these few settings under services will be important. These are the settings that if you were using a different router that you'd be enabling as well, specifically UPnP, and then also multicast DNS, which is another service you can kind of see up at the top. There's a few tabs that show you exactly which service needs to be changed or enabled. That also is disabled by default. And again, each of these they're simply protocols that allow multicasting to happen, that allow audio to seamlessly be played over the internet to your devices and to be shared between devices, not only your own device, but then also other devices that need to be searchable and found using unicast and TCP protocols. So, and then once you've made those changes and you've rebooted your network, then you're ready to install your vessel. And again, joke falling flat with Anchorman there. It's an exciting time, and at that point you can then install the vessel. So obviously you can see there's a bunch of prep work that needs to be done in order to be prepared for that. For those who are a bit more familiar with Vessel, if you don't go in and prep your network, there's a few scenarios that we've seen that are very common that we get calls on our tech support team. The one on the very left is a very common scenario where you go in your airplane menu and you go to click the zone, and it's that lovely spin. This is in the background. What's actually happening is your device is trying to send Bonjour protocols to the vessel and to the router, and the router is essentially blocking it since it doesn't recognize the Bonjour protocol as safe, and therefore we get a blocked packet or a drop packet there. This is another scenario for those who have set up in Google Home. When you're getting all excited to go set up, and when you start looking for devices, you get the dreaded no color, can't find anything on your network, which also that specifically refers to more of the multicast protocol that can be disabled by default in your router and within your networking system. And the final one has to do with our app, and this is also one that we find frequently, that our Vessel app, when you're trying to set some internal settings, you get the spinny wheel of death as well. So what our app uses is TCP protocols. So we are calling out from your device to anything on the network that resembles a vessel. And if that TCP or UDP protocol is getting sent out and being rejected by the server or the router, basically our Vessel app gets a null, gets a big no-no, and nothing was sent back to us, which means obviously we haven't been able to establish a connection with that vessel unit. And obviously we can, this is a conversation that we could go on for days about. Why is it that Vessel really requires this type of setup? I think first and foremost, a lot of our users and a lot of us forget about our networking equipment that sits in the background or sits on a rack. how frequently are we updating our phones and our technology, but how many times are we simply just allowing our modem or our router to kind of sit collecting dust and just praying and hoping that it works? As the tech industry continues to move forward and innovate, really what happens to our networking system is it loses, it can lose, it gets left in the dust when it comes to updated protocols. I know with the introduction of AirPlay 2 specifically, that was only a little over a year ago, router companies have been scrambling to make sure that their settings can be changed and, you know, by default to work seamlessly with AirPlay 2 technology. So, and then obviously the other reason is in this day and age of security, it's very important and you know, for these router companies to kind of cover their butts and to make sure that these settings are as high as possible, which then for gamers, for audio listeners, causes problems when they've really locked down their network and don't allow for multicast and bonjour protocols to freely communicate back and forth. So the final little bit is for those customers that you are experiencing some issues on, the first thing that we suggest when you go back to a home, and this is if maybe before this webinar, you installed some vessels and didn't make any changes to the network, and then they call back saying they're experiencing some of those issues that we saw on a previous slide. The first thing to do is power down all your vessels. For the A1s, unplug them. Obviously, make those network adjustments that we talked about. It's very important for you to reboot your entire network. And then, unfortunately, factory reset all of those vessels. All that hard work that you did in Google Home needs to be redone. And that's for the vessels to show up, to be handed a new IP address, and so that the router doesn't recognize this existing IP address as a problematic and a unit that needs to be blocked in some sense. So that's basically what the extent of what we wanted to share today when it comes to the in-depth network technical training. I don't see any questions on the webinar yet, but there are some extra tidbits and items that we could talk about if we wanted to. But I think it'd be good to use the next little bit of time if there are any questions or comments, especially since we kind of went over it quickly and there's a lot in there to digest.
There is one question that just came on. They're asking if you're going to sell vessel retail, or will you protect your dealers and installers?
Yeah, Devin, you still on? Yeah.
Yeah, I can answer that one. We do plan on protecting our pricing. We have a very strict MAP policy. We've always been a dealer and distributor first type company, and some of these products will be be able to be purchased by an end user, but again, we are very strict with our MAP policy, so we'll make sure to protect the pricing. Were there any others?
I don't see any other questions. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type it in on the Q&A section. Actually, one more just came through. Will you come out with a standalone?
Sorry, cut out. A what?
Will you come out with a standalone speaker as the next question?
That is a great question. The answer is yes. We are working on some wonderful things right now. So we have a few different products that are coming out later this year that we've been working on, and we are very excited about them. as it gets a little bit closer, we'll be releasing more information about that. But yes, we will have a standalone speaker along with some other really cool solutions.
And it's important to add, Devin, I'll say that our distributors, to kind of reaffirm that first and foremost, our distributors are of the utmost importance to us. You will be getting that information before anyone else.
Correct.
Before we make any announcements, there will be some distributor and dealer emails that go out to you to let you know, let you ask questions, and make ourselves available for that.
Awesome. Another question was, how often do you have
Angela, it sounds like you're cutting out again. Go ahead and ask that question again, would you?
Yes, sorry about that. How often do you have firmware updates?
I think the question was, how often do we have firmware updates? I can kind of answer that. I think it all depends on what technology comes out. Because we are certified partners with Apple, Google, Spotify, we have contracts where we are required to update. Specifically, not so much with Apple, but with Google, we specifically we are required to update on their timeline Google Cast versions, so that Chromecast works seamlessly and updated. I know that Spotify about once a year comes out with a new ESDK library, so we have to, and we are contracted to keep up with that as well. So I would say at a minimum, we're probably at maybe once or twice a year for a firmware update. But also, if there are any bugs that occur, and we are hearing from our dealers and our customers that there is something going on, then obviously are more than willing to do more of an ad hoc update if it's needed.
Great, thanks. Going back to the standalone speaker, if and when that comes out, do you have any idea if it will be rack mountable? And if not, is that something that can be added on and to any of your other products as well?
Rack mountable, meaning, I guess I don't know if I understand the question. It will be mountable, but not necessarily, I don't think it would be in a rack.
Okay, so customer, oh, sorry, they just clarify. Rackmountable amplifier.
Oh, yeah, so our current products, the A6 and A3 are rack mountable. They come equipped with rack mounting brackets. The A1s, which again are available now, are more of a shelf mount solution. And so if they're going into an equipment rack, the A1s would sit on like a 2U shelf or a 1U shelf. But there's some keyhole slots on the bottom of the A1 and the A3 actually. So if it needs to be mounted on a wall, it can be mounted that way as well.
Great, thanks. Next question, does this work with Crestron?
That is a great question. So we do have a couple of drivers that we have built. We want to make sure that it's clear that the vessel works best as a standalone audio solution. However, given these different control automation products and platforms that are out there, we've realized that we need to try to be able to play with some of them, at least the big ones. And so, yes, we do have a driver built for Crestron, and It's a newer driver that we've recently completed, and we're working through some bugs on that. But yes, we do have that available now, and that's on our website and can be downloaded there.
Perfect. This might also be similar, but they're asking you any third-party controls like Savant.
So the third-party controls we have now are Control4. We have URC and Crestron. Those are the only three that we currently have.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I don't seem to have or see any other questions that are in the chat box. So if you wanted to just do any closing remarks, we can do that. And if there's any other questions that do arise after this webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Streetwave or contact Vessel. So Devin, Taylor, if you guys want to have any closing remarks, please do so.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for joining this webinar. We really do appreciate the time. We strongly fully believe in our product. We have full confidence that, you will like our product, and it will be, it can be a fantastic source of revenue for your business. So if you haven't tried it yet, we encourage you to do so. And again, if you have tried it, well, whether you have or haven't, this training that we just went over today will help you immensely with the success of the Vessel brand within your portfolio of products that you carry. So we will be, we'll have this training available that we can send out. So we can either send that to Streetwave and there, your representative can get that to you. But again, we strongly recommend reviewing this again and again until you have the process down, and especially when it comes to networking. So that's all I had. Taylor, did you have anything else to add?
No, just that if you are experiencing some issues, if there's a job, especially your first, where you would like some assistance, myself and our tech support team is more than happy to assist you with that. While you're on site, if you can give us a little bit of heads up when you'll be on site, especially for that first install, we are always happy and willing to assist you.
Thanks, everyone.